The origin of life is light, melanin, and water in order of abundance in the universe. The cells have everything to require to live. So this is the first step of life. And melanin is the darkest, the blackest, absorbs all the electromagnetic spectrum. But I have good news. It's the first step of life.
This is Decentralized Radio. I'm Tristan.
And I'm Ryan.
The goal of this podcast is to help educate you on how to live your most optimal life. We will host industry expert guests to shed light on topics that matter.
We are not gurus, rather two individuals who have had to pave their own path to health and vitality, independent of the centralized systems that plague modern society.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Decentralized Radio. Today, we have Dr. Arturo Solis Herrera on the line from Mexico. He is the director of the Center for Human Photosynthesis and Research, also technical director of Magisterial Formulas. He's an expert in melanin. That's why we wanted to get him on the show. A really interesting topic to discuss. And I believe he's a medical surgeon, ophthalmologist by training. Dr. Herrera, how are you doing today? How's it going?
Fine, thank you. Hello, everybody.
Yes? All right. So I wanted to, I've read your book here, which is kind of, Melanin the Master Molecule. And yes, yeah, it's fantastic. It seems like it's a collection more so of the research that you've done as opposed to like a standard or a normal book. But it's cool because it gives, an insight into everything that you've been doing and researching around melanin. And I kind of wanted to start off with, how did you discover, or maybe you could share the story of how you discovered melanin and its properties outside of, the traditional thought, which to me is melanin. And as you wrote in your book, melanin is just a skin protectant. It's, we get tan and it protects us from the sun. But how did you discover that it was more than that? And we can maybe get into the details of all this, of course.
Well, I was studying the treatment cause of blindness worldwide. This glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, and macular degeneration. And I study the blood vessels of the optic nerve. The optic nerve is so small in humans, 12 human hairs together. And we study, like every study, clinical study, observational study. But I began to notice certain details that draw my attention. And looking for books, I questioned to my masters, my teachers, and nobody told me something convincing. And I followed the track. And 12 years later, and 6,000 patients, I understood that melanin dissociates and reassociates the water molecule, like plants. This is a short, in short, the story, but I can give you some clues. For instance, I found that more melanin, less blood vessels, and vice versa. Less melanin, more blood vessels. If you see the arms or the legs of the people with fair skin, you will see that fair skin has more vessels than dark skin and legs? Is the first question. And what's the reason? What's the reason? And later I understood that it's the oxygen. More oxygen, less blood vessels, and vice versa. So, but where was 12 years? I commend you in 5 minutes, but in fact was 12 years. But it's good. It's a good. This acknowledgement can allow us to advance in the acknowledgement and to resolve many problems. For instance, in health and in water pollution, because the human eye has 3 or 4 milliliters of water, and it's the same water all the life, never rechange. That is already known 100 years ago, but nobody note that for practical aims is stagnant water. And this stagnant water never lose oxygen.
I guess, Dr. Herrera, maybe for our audience, and most folks don't know what the dissociation of water is, why that's very important, and how that process can generate energy. So maybe you could explain that fundamentally. So as my understanding, melanin is able to capture energy from light, both visible and non-visible, and use those photons and that energy to break apart or disassociate the water molecule and then also reform it. So then where is the energy coming from? And in your book, you write about the 4 electrons that are generated from this balanced equation. Where is that coming from? Is that just a transfer of the energy from light? And why is it really important that it can both disassociate and reform the water molecule?
Well, what I found is that our body does not take oxygen from the air. Instead, take the oxygen from the water inside the cells, like plants. That's the similitude, and that's wonderful. And the proof is that when the COVID patients comes to the hospitals, and the medical personnel try to introduce oxygen through lungs, 90% of the patients will die, because the breathing movement is just only to expel CO2, nothing else. And it's a work of 24 hours, night and day. But the oxygen our body takes from water inside the cells. And this is the beginning of life. So in this process, the cells gets many things: oxygen, energy, electrons, high energy electrons, movement. The cells have everything to requires to live. So this is the first step of life. That's why very important. And melanin is the darkest, the blackest, absorbs all the electromagnetic spectrum from the gamma rays to radio rays. Obviously has a certain affinity for ultraviolet, but it's a little bit. It's not some very affinity, very high affinity. It's a little bit more. But the melanin, and it's not know why, is capable of take this energy, and this energy translate to water dissociation, because it's very hard to dissociate the water molecule. It requires a lot of energy, but with melanin it's no problem, because it absorbs a lot of energy. And this energy is dissipated, as any compound must dissipate energy, absorbed energy, dissociating the water molecule. So melanin is apparently has not activity. It's just a sunscreen. But I have good news. It's the first step of life. I could say the origin of life is light, melanin, and water in order of abundance in the universe.
So I think that's really important what you were just saying about the dissociation of water in the cell, because what I wanted to ask you as sort of a follow-up is, as predominantly we've moved indoors, like 90% of our life is spent in some sort of box, whether that's at the office, at home, driving to work. And so we're sort of blocking this process of making melanin, at least on the skin, And so why is it important, or actually what is the damage of having moved inside predominantly in association to making the dissociation of water that you were just talking about? I'd sort of love your thoughts on that.
Well, melanin is in every cell, not only the skin. Melanin is in every cell of our body, needs melanin. And we have other molecules that dissociate water. For instance, hemoglobin. Because the oxygen does not gain trans to the body through the lungs. So the role of the blood is not to carry the oxygen from the lungs to the tissues. No way. The hemoglobin dissociates irreversible water molecule, because the blood is a chemical laboratory in movement. During the trip of the several substances that is carried by the blood, these substances have changed, but very exactly changed. And the transport of gas is just CO2 that the blood takes from the tissues and bring to the lungs. And the lungs expel the CO2 because it's very dangerous and is continually formed inside our body. So night and day we are boom. But oxygen is taken from the cells, from the water inside the cells. Every cell needs a machinery, a complete machinery to produce its own energy. The cell cannot depend of that is blood. No. The cell constantly needs energy. Melanin needs a trillion of seconds to dissociate the water molecule. It's amazing.
So
you explain very well the origin of life.
Yeah. The time, I think, is really important there, and also that the cell constantly needs energy. And we can talk about ATP and the electron transport chain, I think, a little bit. But first, you mentioned hemoglobin. So the red blood cells don't have mitochondria, so they have hemoglobin, right? So how are they able to get that energy? You're saying it's from hemoglobin. You're saying hemoglobin can disassociate the water right in the red blood cell. That's where the oxygen's coming from. Why, or what's the difference between hemoglobin and melanin? Because hemoglobin can only disassociate, not reform the water molecule. So why is that an important distinction, and why does that make melanin superior, I guess, from a respiratory pigment perspective?
Because melanin in hemoglobin is relatively a simple compound, like chlorophyll. The similitude between chlorophyll and hemoglobin is huge.
Yeah.
Even coming from the same precursors, protoporphyrin IX. And the protoporphyrin IX is present in all living things. So it's the same way. It's the same. But and melanin is a very complex substance. The formula is not known. And melanin, that's why melanin can dissociate and reform water molecule. For instance, melanin is so strong, so can support the oxygen toxicity. And hemoglobin, no. Chlorophyll, no. These compounds do not support the oxygen toxicity. That's why the chlorophyll, once the water molecules dissociate, the oxygen is expelled to the atmosphere. Otherwise, in less of 20 seconds, chlorophyll stops the function.
That's super fascinating, actually. And
Yes.
you sort of were alluding to this earlier when we were talking, when I asked my prior question about melanin. You were saying at the very beginning that melanin's all over the place, not just in our skin or in our eyes or in our hair. And there are actually different types of melanin, like eumelanin, pheomelanin, neuromelanin. I'd love for you to sort of explain for our audience the difference between the three and sort of the importance, because I think, like you said, a lot of actually Tristan said this too at the beginning, was a lot of the focus on melanin from a more conventional perspective has been only as basically sun protection. Like if anyone had ever told me about that, but I'd love to hear about the differences between the three and sort of like their importance, because it's super interesting. And you covered this a lot. It's like, it's crazy.
Okay. Trees also has melanin, but is named lignin. But the name, it doesn't matter. You don't take care of that. But if you see the cortex of the trunk has the same color, the skin. So in the water dissociation and reform in the trees is in the trunk. Chlorophyll is similar to hemoglobin, so it's limited its role. The great history is in the trunk. That's why the sap up and down and at high velocities in some place 400 kilometers by second. And the same time, the sap, when it's travel in the trunk, has chemical chains, very accurate chemical chains. And the energy necessary for this accurate chemical change coming from an accurate source of energy, melanin or lignin, if you wish, doesn't matter. You see?
So you're saying basically that the type of melanin, and there's more melanins that exist in fungi and in microbacteria, and they're all kind of doing the same thing, right? Is that what you're saying? Okay. And it makes sense because the conventional thought is the chlorophyll is absorbing energy from the sun, and that's where the plants get their energy or create their glucose through photosynthesis. And you're saying this is not the main energy source, and it's actually coming from the tree, which makes sense because there's always this phenomenon of, how is water being, circulated throughout, plants and trees from the bottom to the end of the leaves, and melanin could be the reason that this exists. So I want to get into kind of the details a little bit. So you mentioned already melanin can absorb the entire electromagnetic spectrum. That's where it receives all this energy. It maybe has a little bit higher absorption for UV light, but in reality, it can still absorb the entire magnetic spectrum, which, from gamma rays to visible light, and below that to extremely low frequencies. Because of this, what's that?
Even graviton is absorbed.
Yeah, graviton?
Gravitons, the component of the gravity is absorbed by melanin.
That's fascinating. So, that's really cool. And I guess how this works is it's using molecular hydrogen, right, as the energy carrier. And you talk about in your book how hydrogen is the main energy carrier in the universe. So maybe you can explain that a little bit better than I can. Why is this really important, and why is hydrogen kind of the main energy carrier used throughout biology and the universe? Hey, friend. Thanks for listening. If you really enjoy this podcast, it would be really appreciated if you left us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or subscribe to our content on YouTube. This helps us get to a larger reach and a larger audience to spread this wonderful free education.
Because the energy is necessary to produce any change. So, and the hydrogen is the energy carrier per excellence in the universe. So it's the best energy carrier. And it's not so much energy. Hydrogen is so little, but it's enough to produce the life. That's why the dissociation of water inside melanin is continually, seems as continually, but it's and this energy is captured by all the reactions, chemical reactions that happens inside the cells. Any reaction in the cell needs energy constantly. And the hydrogen is the best one because it's produced around the cell nucleus. It's the main location of melanin granules around the cell nucleus in the perinuclear space. It's produced there. And the energy, hydrogen, is released like spheres of high energy that is growing in all directions. So the melanin is forming a graph around the cell nucleus. So melanin is the source of energy of the cell nucleus because the cell nucleus has not mitochondria, has not ATP, and has a lot of energy requirements. And the energy is follow the laws of simple diffusion. So
So you're saying basically hydrogen, it's, and what I kind of figured is that, it's obviously the smallest. It's a very small molecule. It's able to easily diffuse. It's able to easily get into the cell compared to, say, ATP, and it's melanin as well, right? Melanin is abundant in the cell, so it's not reliant, and it can kind of dissipate energy, radiate in all directions. Is that how you kind of lay it out, or how does the transport work? It just flows through hydrogen diffusing into the cell?
Well, hydrogen is captured easily for the compounds. And because the process of dissociation is so accurate, extraordinarily accurate. So the process is very standardized. And the form is, and if you recall, around the cell nucleus is an structure that the name is, in English is reticle endoplasmic, that cover totally the cell nucleus. So no one drop of hydrogen can escape. It's produced, and in the plasmic reticles catch hydrogen. And the endoplasmic reticles is the fabric of the cell. Many compounds are formed there, so it's all begin to have a coherence. Okay, and the molecules of hydrogen that pass through this endoplasmic reticle can catch but Golgi body, and another and the other components, organelles of the cell, even reach the cell membrane. Because the cell membrane does not need too much energy. That is, it's Grongi believed that the water is introduced in the cell with energy. But I think it's not really, because when you dissociate and reform water, a vacuum is followed. So the water is absorbed, but the cell membrane does not use energy to entrench the water into the cell, because this vacuum absorbs the water.
Yeah, I think that makes sense as to why it's so important for the cell nucleus to have that energy, and hydrogen is an energy carrier. But then also in the dissociation, or I should say in the reformation equation, you're getting 4 high energy electrons, right? From reforming the water molecule. So where are those electrons coming from? I guess that's my question. Are they being captured from as photons, and then that's exciting electrons from melanin, or is that coming from the water itself being reformed? That was kind of my question as I was reading your book.
It's impossible to know where the high energy electrons come from, because it's easily interchangeable. So it can coming from an atom, a molecule, it's not known, because it's easily. So it's not specifically. It's not easy to answer this, but the part, I think the fibrous part of the cell is the benefit mainly by these electrons, because electrons are readily absorbed, and hydrogen travel through water cell, following the laws of simple diffusion, from the more concentration to the less concentration. Easy.
Got it. That makes sense. And I wasn't sure if that's kind of what I figured it might be. The answer is that we don't know. And I just wanted to confirm that melanin is kind of both an electron donor and acceptor, correct? Because you write that it's a very strong acceptor in the book, and obviously it's a donating electrons as well. So is that another special characteristic of it?
No, it's something totally different. Perhaps it's the most complete molecule, but melanin is a great electrons acceptor. And it's the greater molecule. The molecular weight is not known. It's the biggest. It's enormous. The dark matter the behavior of the melanin to control the energy explain the slow basement of the planet, the slow movement that Einstein said. Why planets move so slowly? So this explains the melanin controls the energy at all levels. It's the British Petroleum of the universe.
That's so crazy. So whenever I guess in mainstream you sort of hear about energy on a cellular level, they always talk about ATP. So what does this mean for ATP?
No, ATP is so small molecule. It's just a crazy idea from some research that say phosphorus, when we can make phosphorus, so this can be the source of energy. And the idea growing. But if you see how ATP release energy is not known. It's just conformational variation. No, the life needs a lot of energy. So ATP is more to control temperature, because when ATP is hydrolyzed, energy is absorbed. So when ATP is hydrolyzed, the temperature of our body decreases. And when ATP is formed, energy is released. So when ATP is released, when ATP is formed, the temperature of our body increases. That's why the people with fair skin has more mitochondria, much more, even 83%, than the dark skin. That's why people with fair skin cannot tolerate tropical, because the physiology is adapted to the cold countries to increase the temperature, but not to produce energy. No. And I think it's also for control phosphate toxicity, because phosphate is necessary for life, but the levels must be very, and the ATP and ADP control the. I think this is the most important role of ATP, phosphate, and mitochondria.
Yeah, I think I want to get into the lifestyle of like haplotype and fair skin versus dark skin and where you live maybe in a bit. But I think on the water and the ATP side of things, that's something I recently learned, is the ATP is opening these binding sites for water. And, I've been reading a lot about, quantum coherence of water, proton chains, and the flow of energy. Do you think that this is imperative as well for the melanin dissociation of water, that the fact that we have quantum coherent water and this cell communication going through water is kind of working in synergism with melanin to be able to effectively produce energy?
Okay, could be, but melanin is the master molecule. Everything comes later. So the ATP, it's obey melanin, orders through energy. So the role of ATP, is below the great role of melanin.
Got it. And based on what you're saying earlier on the types of melanin, you think neuromelanin is even more mysterious, I guess, in structure, right? So you think they're all still functioning the same, although they might have a slightly different structure molecularly?
No, it's the same function.
Okay.
Interesting.
Neuromelanin it has a function of 24 hours because the brain needs oxygen night and day. And the main location is in the brain stem, substantia nigra and locus coeruleus, another part. But when melanin is impaired by pesticides, for example, the outflow of oxygen is impaired, so the growing spheres is smallest. It has not the size that must be needed to nutrient the cortex. For instance, the more far cerebral cortex is frontal cortex. And this is the first cortex that is impaired, but with melanin is impaired because the energy simply cannot reach in enough quantity tissue.
Interesting.
Suddenly, everything becomes coherent if we try to explain the function of the brain in basis at the main source of oxygen in the brain is substantia nigra and locus coeruleus. That's why typically neurodegeneration is often accompanied by growing of the ventricles. Why? Because the melanin that dissociates the water of the ventricles is impaired. So cannot dissociate the water, and the water simply is accumulated.
Interesting. So sort of on that note, and I may be way off because I'm hardly the expert, but this is just how my mind has been working. I've been reading a lot about neurodegeneration and things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and all these things. And in Parkinson's, like there were some studies that were showing the overall melanin levels in skin and hair were significantly lower in those individuals. And so when it comes to like things like neuromelanin, it was just making me wonder, how is it that we make neuromelanin? Does that come from eomelanin in any way, or is that separate?
It's inside the cells.
Yeah.
Always.
Okay.
And the fetus formed neuromelanin from the food, like any person. The body can make melanin from many ways, metabolic pathways. That's why we need a little food of that tree, or we don't need to eat certain specifically food. No, the body is great, it's magnificent. And obviously, the location and function determines the amount of melanin, because brain stem is a very compacted tissue, has a lot of cells, so need a lot of oxygen. And that's why the cerebral scissors, brain scissors, because in that way, the water of CSF reach every corner of the brain. So every neuron has direct access to the main substrate, to the main source of energy, that is water.
Yeah, I think we can get into maybe what's like good for melanin production and sunlight and how often you should be outside. But last point on the oxygen piece, because I think this is really important for people to understand, and it's quite a controversial stance. So you're saying that all of the oxygen that's used within our cells is coming from the dissociation of water through melanin, and that we're breathing to exhale CO2. So theoretically, the exhalation then is far more important than the inhalation, or maybe you could, is it like is that oxygen we breathe in being used for anything? Or I'm just trying to kind of counter here a little bit so people can understand and wrap their head around this.
No, it's because the drive of gases is very difficult. Even the CO2 is 25 times more diffusibly than oxygen. That's why nature has to change the oxygen, because oxygen diffuses so little, so cannot be expelled like in plants. And the nature just put a carbon atom in every oxygen molecule, so that can expel easily. Because the CO2 does not come from the metabolism. No, degradation, not too much. I think the good part of this CO2 coming from that the incessantly production of oxygen that will be expelled from the body, because oxygen also is toxic. So must be the levels of oxygen is optimized at most, but and no more. So that's why the drive of CO2 by the lungs is the same in all species. Even CO2 is 25 times more diffusible than oxygen, but it's not enough. So the nature creates a marvelous enzyme, carbonic anhydrase. I love it. So increase pK million times. So CO2 is expelled faster.
Yeah, to me, it's really fascinating. It almost kind of makes sense a little bit. We've talked to a lot of breath hold practitioners, and they're a lot more focused on CO2 now than oxygen and exhalation of CO2 and CO2 tolerance. So I think that makes sense. But if anyone wants to learn more, you have a lot of the great, pressure gas law equations in the book and your studies. So I think, if you're skeptical, you can work that out. But to me, it makes sense that everything is kind of localized, right? Because everything needs to happen so instantaneously in the body. And, if we're just waiting and based on the diffusion properties of oxygen, I think it's very plausible. But maybe we can get into the lifestyle piece a bit here and how to optimize melanin. And Ryan, I'll let you chime in for asking about this, kicking us off.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's like a lot of people like ask me, or Tristan's like, okay, so what do I do then? Like how much sun do I get? Do I need to pay attention to like you were mentioning like the fairness of skin versus darker skin earlier in the podcast, and I think there's an important contrast there. So I'd love for you to sort of just dive in and sort of maybe discuss like, I'm never a big fan of like dosage stuff because there's a lot of context in that. Like there's not a one size fits all. But when it comes to like sun exposure and how can we optimize melanin, I should say, what are some like things that are top of mind for you?
With prayer, meditation, with friends, with music, with lectures.
I like the music part.
Okay, I agree. And not extremes. Even too much sun is dangerous. Too much water is dangerous. So must be life with a certain coherence. No alcohol. 1 cup of alcohol disequilibrate the accurate dissociation of water 2 weeks.
Wow.
So, yes, it's too much.
I didn't know that. I'll have to tell my mom and she'll be disappointed, but I'll let her know.
So yeah, so that's He said that alcohol can interrupt dissociation of water for up to 2 weeks, even 1 cup.
It's not interrupted totally.
Or no.
It's partially.
Partially, yeah.
But that is enough to the body disorganize.
Mm-hmm.
Because the requirements of energy, oxygen, the cell is so accurate. It's incredible. With 40 seconds that the dissociation make this, begins some kinds of alterations.
It's a very precise process that alcohol can disrupt. So I think that's the important thing. And then the other thing you mentioned is that, too much sun is bad. And that in the book you mentioned that melanin is kind of like an energy transducer, that melanin, the reason why we develop more eumelanin on the skin is it's filtering more light out when there is abundance, and it's letting more light in when we need it. So my question then is, does that mean it's very important to live in an environment that your skin is kind of suited for? Say, European folks like Ryan and myself maybe live a bit more north. Folks who are darker skinned should be, living close to the tropics or, where there is more sun. Do you think that is like very important for health and energy production then?
Yes, in at most possible, because the skin, the body needs several generations to adapt to new environment.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in 2-3 weeks. No. In 2-3 weeks, we have certain adaptations, visual adaptation, more melanin. But the number of mitochondria to descend takes years. It's complex adaptation to it. That's why the people with dark skin almost die in winter in northern countries. The people believe it's lazy. No, its physiology is dropped totally.
Yeah, and if you didn't hear Dr. Herrera earlier, that if you could have an 80% difference in mitochondria count based on the color of your skin. And that's very important because the mitochondria are basically like furnaces in the winter. They're producing a lot of heat, and that's what's keeping our bodies warm in the winter and colder climates. So, but where I want to tie this in is we live in a modern lifestyle and we are outdoors getting sun a lot less. So a lot of folks in the health community are advocating people like Ryan and myself, like people with fairer skin, to move south closer to the tropics, closer to the equator, to get basically, more sun with less effort. And I'm curious what your thoughts are there. If you think this is a bad idea, and how maybe we should think about this in the modern environment, because we're outside less, sometimes probably 90% less often than 200 years ago.
Yes, our body is so efficient, so we can move with no problem. So, and we don't need to take the sun all the time. No, even indoors, our melanin gets enough energy to dissociate the water molecule. And if we respect melanin with no supplements, with no alcohol, with no pesticides, with no herbicides, with no fertilizers, with no metal, with no plastics, or melanin is so efficient to support the life. But if melanin is already impaired by pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, polluted water, solvents, industrial waste, alcohol, supplements, additives of soft drinks and fast food, the melanin is already and cannot dissociate adequately.
Are you interested in 100% grass-fed, grass-finished bison meat? I'm excited to be a partner with Falls Family Ranches. Based in Wyoming, Falls Family Ranches is raising high-quality bison meat the way nature intended. As a native large ruminant of North America, bison is one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can consume. If you're interested in trying out their bison boxes, use code Tristan, Tristan, 10 for 10% off your first order.
So that kind of makes me think about, because like when we're talking a lot about, I mean, what comes to mind for me is like making an idealized environment as much as possible. And obviously it's not possible to like go back hundreds of years or anything like that. So we have so much light. We have dirty electricity from non-native EMF and stuff like that. And does melanin do anything to protect us from things like artificial light exposure, non-native EMF exposure? Like, does optimizing that help create a buffer for that exposure? Obviously, it's never going to be perfect, but I'd love your thoughts on that because I've heard several different things.
No, it's the cell phone thing, the satellite radiation is a problem because melanin is not the natural source of radiation to melanin. So melanin, I think melanin is energized in an abnormal way. So some kind of disorganization can happen. It's not so natural. No, obviously it's a buffer. It's a great buffer, but has its limitations.
So you're saying that although melanin can absorb the whole electromagnetic spectrum, it's not biologically tuned or designed for maybe radio frequencies and kind of some of these technologies, because it would have never been exposed to that level of radio frequency intensity historically.
Yes, that's why animals in farms that is wind to energy to move, the animals die. Why? It's not only the sound, it's the type of energy that is distorted, so accurate.
My question, I guess, just curiosity would be like if the darker skinned animals would be less affected than the lighter skinned animals. You know, if they have more melanin, maybe it's acting as a natural Faraday cage. But basically, what you're saying is it's kind of interrupting or it's interfering with melanin's ability to disassociate water as an unnatural amount of this frequency.
I don't know exactly, but
yeah, we don't know. It's all theorizing.
Speculation.
Right? Yeah,
we don't know exactly because sometimes could be that melanin is already impaired, so cannot support a frequency different, so different because the frequency is the phone cells is very, I think a healthy melanin can support surprisingly, but in the current way of life, I think all the people has this process impaired because we are surrounded by pesticides, herbicides. That's the problem. So we need more melanin to protect from this radiation. For instance, in my house, in your house, we put melanin in the walls and in the ceiling. Unfortunately.
that's cool.
Until I developed this compound.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious about that because we talk a lot about the benefits of melanin and why it's so important. And there's other benefits such as, detoxifying heavy metals that we haven't discussed either. But in reality, you're saying that we need to just be healthy individuals to have proper melanin production and then proper melanin ability to disassociate water. And you've developed these, I believe they're precursor drops, right? Is this the best way to improve melanin's ability to disassociate water, or how has this kind of changed mainstream medicine?
Yes, finally, this compound restores oxygen levels through restore water dissociation, because it's a highly regulated cycle. So when I was studying the 12 years, 6,000 patients, I understood in the bottom that I have to push so the system make this. And this is the result. And it's very efficient. Why? Because the name of the disease doesn't matter. The body to work well only needs adequate levels of oxygen, hydrogen, and high energy electrons. That's it. Start of the story. And the first step is well, all the reactions that mold the life will be well. It's that even so that the name of disease doesn't matter. Any disease that affects our health must start at this level. Meanwhile, the oxygen is in good shape, the words we work well, because nature makes our body perfectly, everyone. God made us seriously and not in series. So even genetic disease does not exist. No. We see persons exposed at the same toxic compounds. That's why the mother, the grandmother, what? The same house, the same food, the same water, so the same exposure. But because even the genes need oxygen. Every part of the body has oxygen.
So you're sort of saying that ultimately your environment is pretty much the ultimate trump card, because I have the very same thought process of two people can get the same stimulus and have two different outcomes. And the determining factor of that was maybe how they set themselves up and their past exposures. And there's that sort of realm of thought of like less focus on DNA aspects and more focus on mitochondrial DNA and how that functions. But kind of goes back to the way I'm taking away from this conversation, going back to how we optimize melanin and therefore the dissociation of water and oxygen and stuff like that. Because you need all these components to make a healthy body. And that's why they all kind of work uniform. And that's because in my mind, it's like to optimize, say, those drops that you were mentioning, you kind of need all the things in place to make it's still probably beneficial, right? But to make it really beneficial, you need to optimize kind of the full circle. Am I getting that right?
Yes. That's why even melanin placed in the water tank is a great idea, because the high levels of oxygen in water increase the quality of drinking water in a surprising manner. In my house, in your house, we have melanin in the water tank, and the water we put melanin every place. In all of the family, we don't COVID. We don't have COVID. No one, no vaccines. It's not necessary. A body imbalance is a great thing. It's a gladiator.
So, well, that's fantastic to hear. You mentioned no COVID, no vaccines. Kind of what I wanted to get into is how this has been perceived, how this could be revolutionary for medicine. But that's why I asked you to come on Decentralized Radio, because obviously everything that you've researched, everything that you've done is very controversial to the mainstream thought process, the big medical institutes, big pharmaceutical companies. So sorry about it. No, it's fantastic. And I want to thank you for your work, because it's really important. And I'm curious, how has this been received by your community, by patients who are taking it? And are these drops, are they low cost? Are they affordable? Do they work? Do you need to take them every day, or is it kind of like a dosing of maybe a cycle on and off? Does it improve longevity? Like, is this it? Is this all we need? And is everything else just kind of BS?
Yes, because the aging is based that the attractions is optimized and repulsions is diminished. It's a fact observed in the aging. It's even in all around in the concrete, by example, is more compact with time. More compact. That's why with the aging, the people smaller is compacted, because of attractions increase and repulsions is diminished. So, and the life is based in the regulations of this process. For instance, the highest level of energy in the muscles is a contraction or relaxation.
Relaxation, I know that.
Yeah, because we need more energy to relax the muscle. The contraction is a chemical pathway only. That's why in the precedent, the muscles is turning spastic, because the energy is at low level. To relax a muscle, we need energy. So and then the muscle is relaxed. The attraction is diminished, and in repulsions is regulated, and the muscle has the adequate form, size, function. So this energy comes from water dissociation, because myoglobin dissociates the water molecule. Really?
I remember reading that in your book, and it kind of makes sense, because when you're stressed, or that energy production, I guess, would be compromised, you're in a very tense, tight state. And only when you're relaxed fully mentally as well, you can be physically. But yeah, I guess, how long has these drops been on the market, and has there been pushback, from using them? And is this something that's easily accessible for people? I guess, how do they find out more? It is a precursor, right? I'm assuming it's like a patented precursor.
It's reasonable, because we need to pay taxes, we need to pay personnel, we need to pay the research of the new development, like melanin in the water and in the buildings, because the contaminations, but the temperature of the buildings is the problem. It's a big problem. And if we put melanin over the buildings, the results is very pleasantly. For instance, when we have 44 Celsius degrees 3-4 weeks ago, your house is 25. Because when the dissociation and reform of the water molecule regulates temperature. It's other functions, regulation of the temperature of the body. And the mitochondria is a complement. ATP is a complement, but the main component is melanin. Always is melanin, here, there, melanin. The other systems is just a cherry in the cake.
So I guess my question would be, like, for someone my age, I'm 27, would it be beneficial to just to take your drops to optimize, or is it more beneficial as you get older and things sort of like change physically, or sort of what's sort of the dosage around that? How do you sparse that?
Yeah, because I just want to add, I think you're right about how the disassociation ability decreases pretty significantly with age.
Yes, after 26 years old, his capacity begin to lose 10% each 10 years. And after 50s, goes into free fall. Sorry.
I'll let my dad know.
No.
But
so I think the people must take this type of compounds since the pregnancy, because the formation of the fetus depends in great measure from the. And if we give to the mother, pregnant mother, this type of compounds, the mother will be well, and the fetus will be well. No problem, because the reproduction is not problem for the nature. So, and I think the sound and down of the photosynthesis is a matter of every day, because if you are in some part and suddenly some fog or some liquid with contaminants reach you, you will. If the contamination increase, the body makes this. With cold, the body makes this. With hot, the body will this. And in the young, the restoring is easy, is fast. But as we advance in age, this recovery is slow, more slow. So if we maintain the integrity of the system, it's a good way to reach the advanced age. Because we don't know in which moment we are exposed to some kind of, it's not possible. So you see that? You see? Water and drops. Cheers.
so that's actually what I was going to ask you too, is like, does it matter how you take it? Do you just put it in water like that? Is there like a certain amount, like a teaspoon that's optimal? Or is it just sort of like, well, how would you take it? And of course, obviously not medical advice, but I just sort of would love to know, because we talk about a lot of different compounds on the show, and sometimes there are cases where it's like more is not better, less is not better. There's like that sweet spot. I know there's a lot of discussion around that over the last several years with CBD and various cannabinoids and stuff like that. But like with this, is there a sweet spot dosage, or is that individual?
Well, I think 3 drops every 2 hours sublingually. Because after 30 seconds, sublingually, after 30 seconds, the body goes into balance. but it's because the body renowned the effect, not the compound is magic. No. The body knows what's happening. And we must accompany the body in this seesaw. And if you feel any upset, any fever, sadness, pain, every upset, then your body is in imbalance at that moment. Why? As a high zone, or you don't eat adequately, or rain, wind, every detail of the life, the daily life. So if you feel some upset, some disturbance, you take the drops every hour or every half an hour. And when you feel the well-being of the balance, then slowly again every hour, every 2 hours. But I think in the current life, 2 hours is a good dose.
That's actually a good note you were making just before Tristan jumps in about being in touch with your body and really paying attention to how you're feeling. Because I feel like a lot of people will go into taking any sort of supplementation without really having a plan. They just kind of hear something is good, so they do it. And there's not really an intention behind it. And then I'm a fan of, before even starting something, really getting in touch with how you feel in the moment and taking note of energy levels and things like that throughout the day to sort of get a baseline. But I think that was a good note of like keeping measure of how you feel throughout the day. Because a lot of people just kind of go through the day without even thinking about it and just assume everything's kind of flowing functionally when that may not be the case. But I'll let Tristan jump in because I know he wanted to say something.
I was just, last piece on the drops. Is there any concern of downregulating and endogenous production by supplementing with this, or not really?
Yeah, supplement is not recommended because vitamins supplements is not recommended because the body must take the nutrients from the meals, as has been done million times. It cannot be perfect. It's the same, it's the way and must be the way. We cannot distort or improve. No, it's not possible. So we must take care of our food. Mainly when I suggest food that air gives, fruits, grains, honeybee, and that's kind of food the body knows very well and is absorbed very well. That the air does not give, as cream, milk, meat. Okay, that's kind of has a relatively stress-free. 1,000 years at most. So the body has problem to metabolize that kind of food. So, but in small quantities can be no problem. In small quantities. So the big quantities air gives, fruit, vegetables, and so on. And is, for instance, iron supplements disturb the balance of the water balance of the dissociation years.
Fortified cereals, probably not good, but I'm curious. So you mentioned the supplements of like vitamins and minerals, but this, your melanin precursor drops, there's no concern that could potentially disrupt endogenous production when you're not using it. there's no side effect of that, or is, I guess, what are you investigating for improvements, in the coming years of this product?
It's because when the hydrogen production is right, all the processes are right, and the body is capable to rebuild itself. So with this kind of therapeutic focus, this real improvement of the health. So if you stop the drops suddenly, you don't feel nothing in the first days because your body isn't in best form that previously. Perhaps with time and the exposure to the toxic compounds of the environment, you begin to feel certain problems because in the current way of life, we need this kind of push to increase the capacity of the body.
So I guess one. Actually, Tristan, did you have something you want to ask really quick?
No, you can go.
Okay, because I'm just curious too. So what areas of research in melanin are you looking forward to delving into deeper? Like, what are you working on currently? I'm just curious. I just want to know.
Well, I'm the building, temperature, food production, alcohol production, and hydrogen production. And we are with the farm, we have built a farm to make a fishery. Because the fish, when melanin is inside the water, the environment of the fish is very good. Oxygen, temperature, pH. So the fisheries will benefit of this kind of material. So we are make this project, and the production in harsh environments, like in the moon, like in Mars, and our results are great. The harsh environment begin to produce life. Because if we introduce this material in the earth, in the soil, the first thing is the oxygen increase. And it's the first step. So the soil is fertilized itself, as must be from the early times. The phosphates, the fertilizers is a finish the fertility of the earth. Why? Because it's not the natural way. Like in COVID patients, that the medical person tried to introduce oxygen forcibly through the lungs, 90% of the patients will die. It's the same in the air, in the water. It's the same cycle in all the living things on Earth, and possible in the universe, because it's a unique form to start a process so complex as life.
That's really cool. And I guess it comes down to it being the fundamental, like, building block of life. So I might have to try some drops on my garden, my trees that I've planted. But maybe the last question, I know we're over time here, is you talk about, or at least I think you created a battery solution or investigated batteries with melanin. And the way I see it is, yeah, if we're able to capture this ability to transform light energy into chemical energy, you could have a much more efficient battery. And I know now there's research coming out from Carnegie Mellon or wherever, Stanford, that looking into actually melanin polymers used for battery technology. Do you think this is an actual, I guess, energy source, sustainable source for the future? Do you think this is the future of batteries?
Absolutely. It's a battery that charges itself is everything. At the end, the half-life of this battery is hundreds of years, because the melanin has the longest lifespan of any already known substance. Proved 160 million years.
So
Yes.
would
Yes.
would the battery just need to be like outside, or how would it capture? What's the input? Is it
Like
just
your body,
just
visible and
outside?
invisible.
Yeah.
Probably outside will be better, but not too much. Not too much. And about the lifespan of melanin is because the squid ink
Yeah.
melanin, and the ink sacs of melanin of squid fossils squid discovered in the exploration is in good shape after 160 million years. So probably is much more than 160 million years. But this is a relevant proof.
But who's going to make money on a battery that lasts forever? I'm curious. Do you think the power levels, would they be high enough for a car or a phone or a bike? Maybe is more doable, but I'm curious.
Eventually, yes.
Eventually,
because
yeah.
It's because it's the same system in the whales.
Yeah.
And the whale has a weight of 40 tons, 60 tons. So it's the same system, melanin. That's why the sea animals is dark. Melanin is completely covered the skin. That's eventually, yes. Fast is the hydrogen that can extract from water. We can take this hydrogen and make it a motor. Indeed, at this moment, it's more easy than a battery, because the battery is highly complex. It's highly complex. We don't know how is water dissociated. We don't know. We have no idea how is absorbed all the wavelengths. We have no idea. So we need to start to experiment.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I hope that scientific institutions and companies are interested in this technology and not just putting it by the wayside, because of the issues with our centralized systems going on and the need to profit immensely. But hopefully there's more folks like you who are kind of taking into their own hands and doing the research on their own to make solutions. So I want to thank you so much for coming on our show. This has been really exciting for me. I've been kind of nerding out about this topic, and I think it's really important. But it goes to show, the more you know, the more we learn, the more we realize that we don't know, and that we're we're beings of complexity, and that maybe everything we've been taught is wrong, and maybe there's simple solutions, but at the end of the day, we have a long way to go to really understand. And melanin is a prime example of that, I think. So, Dr. Herrera, where can people learn more about your work at the Human Photosynthesis Research Center and just in general? I can link your book, which is, I think, a collection of your studies, Melanin the Master Molecule. But yeah, if there's anything else, website, anywhere people can find you or your work, or
www.humanphotosynthesis.com.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on. And thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Decentralized Radio. We'll see you next time.
Bye.